Well, I think this year needs no introduction. Anyways, welcome to 2022 everybody. Now I'm going to start this video by saying this. Before 2022, I never really considered myself an AniTuber. I just like talking about whatever I felt needed talking about, and as you may or may not know, I want to be someone who is known for a lot of things and not just one thing in particular. Despite that though, I feel as though this is the video where I come to accept my place in the AniTube community, considering all commentary videos in 2021 were pretty much anime. No beating around the bush now, I suppose. Now, this doesn't mean all I'm going to talk about is anime. I just feel as though it should be a main thing that my channel is known for now, with other things that will be coming also being present to break up the monotony a little. Either way, for this video essay, we're sticking with KyoAni from where we last left off in the retrospective. Seems like a reliable anime studio to talk about, and this time we're focusing on a movie. One whose message is touching, one whose real characters with their own troubles and flaws make for great characterization in the long run. One whose main character really hit a lot closer to home than I ever would have expected, and whose redemption story sticks with me to this day. Everyone, it's time that I cover A Silent Voice. Now that we're in the anime sphere, let's dial it back to 2016, shall we? And we're back. New year and starting it off with a bang. That bang in question being a movie that I saw last year in June, and have loved ever since. It still comes to mind and doesn't want to leave. And for good reason. It's an excellent experience. What is this movie though? Well, none other than Koe No Katachi, otherwise localized in the West as A Silent Voice. The date is September 17th, 2016, which was when this movie was initially theatrically released to the public in Japan, with Western audiences receiving it later on. This movie was Kyoto Animation's movie adaptation of the manga of the same name. And the manga itself was created by Yoshitoki Oima, and serves as one of their two known works in the field, the other being To Your Eternity. Oima first created Koe No Katachi in 2011, and was only made to be a one-shot. But due to winning the Best Mangaka award in the Weekly Shonen magazine alongside a multitude of other motivations, this prompted Oima to develop the story further, which led to the ASV manga we know today, first publishing in August of 2013 and wrapped up in November of 2014. In the movie's case, the movie adapts most of the story from the manga, the necessary parts between Shoya and Shoko anyway. The only thing it doesn't necessarily adapt is a few arcs from the manga, and the movie doesn't necessarily pay a lot of attention towards the side characters, not to the level of the manga anyway. But despite this cutting out of content, I honestly feel as though the movie did what it needed to do with the story that was provided, and I feel as though the story that was provided is still great all the same. The director behind the movie was Naoko Yamada, who, like Tatsuya Ishihara for the key seasonal work adaptations, is someone that has worked closely with KyoAni, with key animation, episode direction, and other roles of importance, and has also majorly directed in all adaptations of K-On!, the first and second seasons, as well as the movie, Tamako Market and Tamako Love Story, and later on Hibike's side story movie, Liz and the Bluebird. Yamada has stated before that directing involves observing people and their emotions. She focuses on emphasizing the minds of the characters, as well as treating them as if they were real people, with complex and nuanced emotions and all. It doesn't necessarily matter if it's a case of gender, because when she was put up to the role of directing A Silent Voice, Yamada has stated that she wanted to portray Shoya as a real individual despite not really having a grasp of portraying a male's emotions. And she does this by thinking, what kind of person are they, when looking at the root or the core of who they are. So, gender is out of the question when it comes to the characters according to Yamada. Rather, it matters more so about the character in and of itself. So, what does this mean for A Silent Voice? Well, we have a lot to cover first of all, so we should probably just start with that. And start with that, we now shall. So, okay, what is A Silent Voice about? So essentially this is a story that revolves around a guy called Shoya Ishida, someone who is seemingly not in a good state. Something we don't know what for yet, but it's clear to us that he's on the verge of giving up, so to speak. But this leads us onto the events for 5 years prior, where Shoya is in grade school. The teacher of his class introduces us to a new character, in Shoko Nishimiya, who we soon find out is hard of hearing. She's deaf. Due to her disability, she tends to depend on the other classmates for things like understanding spoken lectures and communication. This is something that Shoya doesn't necessarily understand. And as a kid, when you tend to not understand things or people who are different from others for whatever reason, be it a kid's odd demeanor, excelling in something, or having a disability in the case of this story, Shoya thinks it would be fun to tease Shoko with taking out her hearing aids, messing with her, and genuinely just being nasty, ultimately leading to this being bullying from Shoya. Again, Shoya doesn't really understand. He's a kid, so why would he? But the thing is, the teacher doesn't pay attention to the bullying and isn't really there to notice or care about someone picking on another student because of something they can't help. No adult or authority figure was there to really keep the students in check or teach them morality and instruct them on how to treat anyone else, no matter if they have a disability. And that's what makes this all the more heartbreaking. No one pays attention until it's too late. One thing that Shoya doesn't really understand even more is that after all the bullying that Shoya has been doing to Shoko, she still feels like it's her fault for everything and apologizes anytime she feels like she's done wrong. You see, the thing is, Shoko apologizes because she has put up with this before. Alienation and bullying from other students, which is why she always moved schools before coming to Shoya's grade school. She has had trouble fitting in, and sees her disability as a curse and hindrance to everyone around her. At least that's what she believes. The only thing Shoko really wanted was a friend, but no one was willing to really give that to her. Not Shoya, not any of the other students. She tried time and time again to say that she wanted a friend, but all Shoya did was torment her, and it got so bad to the point where Shoya ripped out her hearing aids, causing her ears to bleed and scar. It was at this point that because neither of the two understood each other, all the frustration was building up and Shoko retaliated back at Shoya, leading to the two fighting with one another because of all the torment she had to put up with. All she wanted was a friend, but it felt like slaps in the face for no justified reason. But because of all this torment that she had to put up with from Shoya, she has now left the class and has moved schools once again. And the reason they were given was because of bullying. Bullying that was caused by Shoya and Shoya alone. The blame is now put on him by the teacher and all of the students. The teacher knew about the bullying but didn't do anything to stop it before it escalated. Now, as for it only being Shoya's responsibility, we know this is not true, because a few characters were also responsible for the bullying of Shoko, but Shoya was the main catalyst of it all. Regardless, the other classmates who were responsible denied their involvement, because of course, kids don't want to get into trouble, and so now, Shoya is the only one responsible. He gets bullied, ostracized, and treated in the same way Shoko was. A bully becomes the bullied. And now, because of this, he has no friends, nobody to talk to, no one at all. And now the repercussions of his actions are clear, and he's regretful leading up to the present day. Hence the bridge scene, and his regret for what happened 5 years past, culminating in him sheltering himself away from everyone and having social anxiety, meaning that he has trouble getting to communicate with anyone because of the past. There's visuals of him wanting to jump, but fireworks stop him. They stopped him from committing suicide. Either way, this brings us onto the point behind the Silent Voice's premise. Shoya in the last 5 years has been wanting to make a change, and has been wanting to redeem himself. So he has learned sign language, and when he eventually does happen to meet Shoko again, he utilizes the sign language and says to her if she would like to be friends. The thing Shoko has always wanted all this time. You can tell that here, Shoya is serious about wanting to atone for what he has done to Shoko, going so far as to learn sign language just to communicate with her, and finally get to understand her. And when she realizes this, she bursts into tears, but tears of happiness at that. She's relieved. She's finally found a friend in Shoya, and thus, this begins the redemption story that is Koe No Katachi. So, yeah, this story is essentially about Shoya trying his best to make it up to Shoko and try to redeem himself from the person that he once was before in grade school. But as we get to find out, Shoya has troubles with this because of his social anxiety due to the events that have transpired. And to be honest, after the harassment, who can blame him for being that way? But again, was this what he deserved? Especially after being the catalyst for all the bullying that ensued? Was this really what he should have gotten? It really puts the morality of everyone else into question and not really just for Shoya. This premise, I believe, is one that is simple, but one that is conveyed and presented really nicely. It gives a look into how differences about people are perceived to some, in this case, in a negative light, and how it really affects someone that is put in a bad situation. The unique thing here though is that we see the story from the perspective of the so-called bully, Shoya Ishida, and how that affects his life rather than the actual victim of the bullying in Shoko. And while Shoko is shown a lot in scenes, Shoya is the main focus for the story. He is the protagonist here. Alright, I've basically covered everything I need to talk about for the premise here, so before we get onto the actual story, considering we're using the same format as the key retrospective, presentation comes next. And yeah, no doubt about it, presentation is stellar. I mean, come on, an anime movie from the mid-2010s handled by one of the best animation studios out there, and an attention to detail loving director in Yamada. Yeah, easy to say that this was a field day for the production team, and lots of TLC was given to this. Not as much as you would expect with, say, Shinkai films, but definitely a noticeable amount. But the visuals aren't just, this looks pretty. There's layers to it. Yamada wants to take you to a world where you can feel what is around you rather than just seeing. When it comes to visuals, Yamada states that she draws a very careful line between what actually exists and what doesn't. To elaborate, she says, I want to make sure to form the animation world when simulating through a camera too. So that may be the feeling of trying to feel live action inside the anime world. If it succeeds, the world created may start having colors and smells that expand limitlessly. That's what I believe, and I'm trying to achieve. In doing this, Yamada has created a world within a silent voice which feels vivid and teeming with life. Her visual style is like no other, and it's no wonder why she is regarded as a well-respected director. Remember how I said Yamada loves to emphasize the characters' minds by their actions? She stands by that here too, and it makes more sense due to how Shoya and Shoko both feel within the movie. You can visualize their emotions. This movie portrays Shoya's social anxiety visually as well as through Shoya's behavior and body language. Everyone around Shoya who he doesn't feel comfortable around has X's marked on their faces, to let the viewer know that that is who he blocks out from his life. Not by choice, but because of something that he can't help after previous experiences. Social anxiety. And notice how those highlighted with the X, Shoya doesn't directly look at their faces. He looks away from them usually anywhere other than the face. I believe signifying this in the way that it does here is excellent, as not only is it made clear to the audience that Shoya's anxiety is apparent, but through visuals it is expressed. That's the key word here, expressed. And a lot of other moments in A Silent Voice do show that. And what say the OST? Well, in order to talk about A Silent Voice's OST, you have to talk about the parts in between. More specifically, when the OST doesn't play. A Silent Voice, for the most part, doesn't have much in the way of musical pieces, but when they do play, it's usually somber piano melodies or uplifting vocalizations, which are bliss to listen to in their own right. But like the namesake of the piece of media, most of the movie is silent. With this though, I think it works to the movie's advantage, utilizing the background sound effects as well as the characters' voices to really fit the mood. You don't need music here. All you need is the world around you. Yes, I do actually believe this works better, because again, it's a reminder of Yamada's vision in presentation, and it can encapsulate that perfectly with no need for music to set the tone. One interesting thing that I did come across when searching up stuff for this video was that the opening track for the movie that played when it was focusing on grade school Shoya is a popular rock song called My Generation by The Who. And what's interesting about this track and why I decided to bring it up here is that the lyrics in and of itself are almost synonymous of situations that play out in a silent voice. Most notably the line, "I hope I die before I get old," which may refer to the carefree attitude of Shoya and his friends in grade school, but it could also potentially make sense in the context to grown-up Shoya wanting to jump from the bridge. Not only that, but Pete Townsend, key member of The Who, described My Generation as being a track that wanted to express about finding a place in society, and that he was very, very lost at the time of creating the band. Trying to find a place in society, trying to change and adapt, dealing with being lost, and trying to find themselves. Interesting to say the least. I might be speculating about this, but the usage and the links to Townsend and Shoya's own situation is something to be considered. Maybe someone wanted this track in the movie to really emphasize this. Who knows? And that would have to do it for the OST and sound design within a silent voice, and the one thing we'd have to talk about next is the plot, and well, instead there's no real reason why I should detail every single thing that does happen in a silent voice itself, so in that case I would rather want to take a different approach to the plot, and I can do so in this case with this movie's usage of characters. You see, a silent voice is a character-focused plot, and the thing with character-focused plots is that it relies on interactions between the characters in order to keep the story moving forward. The way a silent voice does this though is with the other characters themselves giving Shoya, and by extension us, advice, courage, and motivation. So, as we know now, Shoya has regretted his actions for the past 5 years. He got bullied, he sheltered himself away from everyone else since then, but is now trying to make it up to Shoko, so he's become her friend. But since the 5-year gap, he hasn't met anyone who would even consider talking to him, let alone be friends with him, and ever since the bullying, he could never consider hanging around his former friends who then bullied him back in grade school. So really, he doesn't know what it means to be someone's friend and has no idea of how to go about it. And here's where Nagatsuka comes in. Nagatsuka is one of the first characters that Shoya encounters, in a case where Nagatsuka is being bullied himself and almost loses his bike. In losing his own bike in the process of stepping in, Shoya then comes across Nagatsuka again, who happens to have gotten Shoya's bike back, bringing it back to him. The X falls from Nagatsuka's face, indicating that this is someone who Shoya is now comfortable to open up to and become friends with. And throughout constant interactions, Shoya and Nagatsuka get closer as friends, and then he becomes comfortable enough to ask Nagatsuka, what does it mean to be friends? Friendship lies somewhere beyond things like words and logic, Nagatsuka says. It's this line here that is special. No words can describe friendship. There's no real logic involved. Being a friend isn't something that we can logically think about or put into words, and there doesn't have to be like any set rules that distinguish what a friendship is or what is not. It's something that we can feel within ourselves. It is because of Nagatsuka's advice that Shoya gets encouraged and wants to meet up with old and new friends alike. This is the catalyst for how he gets to properly talk to Shoko, and then later meets up with his old friends Ueno, Kawai, and Sahara, with new ones in Yuzuru and Mashiba. It's from here that character interactions flourish, starting from between Shoya and Nagatsuka, in which Nagatsuka is advising him what it really means to be a friend, to Shoya and Yuzuru, in which Yuzuru is there to really help Shoya truly express emotions, and for Yuzuru to understand Shoya a little better from what she's been told. We also get to see her deal later on with her constantly looking out for her sister, but never herself, leaving school just to care for her. Kawai, Sahara, and the new guy Mashiba, I couldn't necessarily pinpoint what they give to Shoya, but I feel as though they are really there to round the newly found group of friends. Though Shoya is still uncertain whether or not he should open up to Ueno, because of Ueno's lingering immaturity from grade school. This immaturity is what leads to the confrontation with Ueno and Shoko on the Ferris wheel when everyone goes to the amusement park. Beforehand, when Ueno and Shoya meet up again and see Shoko, she rips out her hearing aids like she and Shoya had done 5 years ago. And here, after trying to get Shoya to talk with Shimada, Ueno feels that Shoko is the reason why Shoya is so sheltered and why he doesn't want to become friends with Shimada. But then she's also confused as to why Shoya doesn't take too well to Ueno behaving this way towards Shoko. Well, it's obvious. You definitely know what happened after everyone collectively singled him out. This is the reason why Shoya doesn't consider Ueno a friend of his at this point. The X is still on her face. She isn't someone that Shoya is comfortable around. With the exception of Ueno, Shoya is able to be confident enough with his other friends to hang out and have fun, something he hasn't had in 5 years. He feels as though it wasn't okay for him to be like this, but it's happening, and he's happy he can even get to experience this feeling again. That is, until things start to go awry, as Kawaii has told his other friends about Shoya's past and what has happened between him and Shoko, which leads to the confrontation between Shoya and everyone else. It's here that Shoya exposes everyone for their faults. Kawaii in always deflecting blame away from herself when she's just as responsible as everyone else was back then. She's another example of not maturing too much, just like Ueno. She has a victim complex, and this is what led to Shoya receiving blame for his actions even now. And once again, it's not saying he wasn't responsible, but that he wasn't the only one responsible for Shoko leaving grade school. Ueno is blamed for her immaturity and her selfish assumptions. Sahara is blamed for cowardice in not knowing how to act. And Nagatsuka and Mashiba being the outsiders of the group who know nothing about the situation from 5 years ago, and can thus contribute nothing to this situation. Things are much different in the manga for this scene, I've been told, but here it still is really painful to see that Shoya is cutting ties and sheltering himself again for past events. Ueno and Kawaii aren't willing to let go. Shoya isn't either though. He can't forgive himself for his actions. It's a scene where a silent voice shows that no one was made to be perfect. Everyone has their demons, and it took Shoya to be singled out again for him to make everyone come face to face with them. While I did say that A Silent Voice is a redemption story, in reality, it's much more than that. It's also a story of wanting to forgive oneself. In saying this, Shoya and Shoko are one and the same. And what I mean by that is that they both deal with anxiety, depression, and have had thoughts of wanting to end it. Shoya because of the feeling that he can't feel a sense of remorse for himself, but Shoko is different in the sense that she deals with this because of how she is being hard of hearing, and how she's been treated over the years because of it. She doesn't feel as if she can stand up for herself. Rather, she feels as though that she is a burden to everyone around her, and only sees herself as the reason as to why Shoya can't be happy. And while Shoya is trying his best to become friends with her, she gets upset knowing that she can't communicate so well and he can't understand her. She gets upset knowing that Ueno is pissed off at her, and planted the ideas in her head that she is the reason for why Shoya is so isolated. Even though he's trying his best to make her happy by having a friend, she can't help but feel that everything that is happening to Shoya now is an adverse effect of being friends with her. It isn't the case, but what else should she believe? She's had a past of bullying and alienation. Why should she believe anything else? Ever since that point, Shoya decides to spend the summer with Shoko and her sister, in the process trying to reconcile with Shoko's mother, and get more attached to Yuzuru and comfort them with the mourning of their now late grandmother. Which would then bring us on to the fireworks display, and the festival, which we were hinted at the start of the movie. Once again, this is a beautiful example of visuals, but the main point here is when Shoko leaves, saying she has to study. She uses a different sign from her usual one though. This is an indication that something was not right. And in trying to retrieve the camera from the Nishimiya residence, Shoya sees Shoko on the balcony, preparing to jump, going to commit suicide. She still has the thought in her head that all she does is cause problems for Shoya, or anyone else. So Shoko thinks this is the only way to rid Shoya of any further sadness. Confusion runs through Shoya's mind, but with haste, he makes it up to the balcony just in time to reach Shoko and grab her before it's too late. He tries to pull her up with all of his strength, and it's then when Shoko has a will to live, all thanks to Shoya saving her. And Shoya promises that he will do better and become a better person for the future to come. But when Shoko is able to make it up, Shoya takes the fall instead. He ends up comatose, and is now in the hospital. In stark contrast to the start of the movie where Shoya's mother had to apologize to Shoko's, it's now Shoko's mother and Yuzuru apologizing to her, as well as Shoko herself, also apologizing to her for everything that has happened as well. Not apologizing like she had done before though, where it wasn't even her fault, but rather truly apologizing, when everything that had led to Shoya falling became her responsibility. And since it became her responsibility, she now feels as though it was her duty to gather together all of Shoya's friends again and rebuild connections, all by herself without doubting herself or feeling as though she is a burden to people. And when we get to see Shoya and Shoko together on the bridge, it feels really empathetic. It feels as though these two characters can finally come to terms with each other and connect. It's that connection which was really the true empathetic moment of A Silent Voice, along with the line, "I want you to help me live," with Shoya wanting Shoko to show him what it really means to forgive himself, open his eyes, and truly make him feel as though he is redeemed after everything. This is the school festival. The end of the movie, essentially. Shoya is still feeling really unsure about being able to face his anxiety, made sick to his stomach and still looks at the floor. X's on everyone's faces. With Shoko by his side though, he is able to connect and make amends with all of his friends. Nagatsuka is still there to be his best bud. Ueno can be understood but not justified with moral logic, but is still considered comfortable by Shoya in the end nonetheless. And Kawaii and Sahara understand and try to work out their problems, which leads to them being comfortable with Shoya too. And this leads us to the ending scene of A Silent Voice, in the festival itself. He finally opens his ears and looks ahead. No doubts in mind, or any negative feelings to get in the way. Looks at all his friends and family, as all the X's drop to the floor. He finally gets to experience the world around him. He isn't afraid, and is able to step into the world with no negativity clouding his mind. He cries at how overwhelming this feeling is. He, for the first time in a long time, feels true happiness. He can see people. He can forgive himself. He is redeemed. This movie has given us the experiences of Shoya Ishida and Shoko Nishimiya. A story of taking pranks too far and realizing the consequences. A story of not being able to get anyone to understand you. A story of making amends. A story of new beginnings. A story of reconciliation. A story of realizing your faults and living with the fact. A story of wanting desperately to be understood. A story of anxieties, depression, and suicide clouding minds. A story of change. A story of determination. A story of self-worth. A story of self-forgiveness. A story of redemption. All of these things are what A Silent Voice is. And whether or not you agree or disagree, these reasons are what made this movie so impactful to so many people. And this would not be possible if the plot wasn't handled with care by the characters within A Silent Voice. They all make it this engaging and this empathetic. And the story is unforgettable, all because of them. Friendship advice, expressing yourself, making connections all over again, to get to the point of becoming redeemed and forgiving yourself. It's brilliant. And on this latest rewatch, I would be comfortable with giving this a rating of. I'm going to conclude this video a little bit differently from how I usually would. Instead of just giving A Silent Voice its praise and calling it a day, I'll be talking about my own personal attachment to this movie. Never judge someone based on their past or supposed rumors. Even if you did something bad, it's okay to regret those bad things. What's most important is to treat others with respect and try to move on from what wrongs you have done in order to truly become a much better person. That was my initial takeaway from this movie, but obviously I gave much more detail this time around. What I wanted to talk about was how this affected me. This piece of media resonated with me but it wasn't anything to do with bullying in Shoya's case. Rather, it was because I felt as though that I myself was portrayed in such a bad manner by people who I thought I could trust. People I feel as though I couldn't trust and felt as though they didn't have the capacity to forgive or care anymore. I felt as though that I had done some bad things myself, yes, which is why I feel like Shoya, and I regret these things. However, reflecting on it further made me feel as though what they did was just to be spiteful and unjust, and not just because of what they said, but also the lying undertones and actions. But even still, I'm trying to become a better person as a result of that even now, and want to bring no harm to anyone around me. I'm someone who believes in live and let lie, so I'd want to apologize and either move on or make an effort to be better for their sake. And that's how I feel that this story resonated with me a lot. I feel as though I can put myself in Shoya's shoes, though our circumstances are different in some aspects. As I said, it is rare for me to resonate with any story, but A Silent Voice just really hit close to home. From its premise, to its visuals, to the score, and the characters. I feel as though you could also resonate with A Silent Voice if you had been in similar situations. I love how it portrays no one as an antagonist. It accepts the fact that we all have our demons, and somehow we're trying to find a way to control them, or cease them. I love how visual connections and connotations can be made in gestures and emotions of characters. I love how natural the characters are and understandable each of them can be in real-world circumstances. And I love how much tender loving care has been put into empathetic moments. It understands how heavy these themes can be, and it makes no mistakes in attempting to execute them wonderfully here in this work. There's really not enough words I can say to you what hasn't already been said to praise how good A Silent Voice is. I'll just say this. This is Kyoto animation for you. This is Oima's beloved work adapted in Yamada's vision. These are the stories it can provide for you. Emotional, heart-gripping, with so much catharsis and resonance baked within. As far as this movie is concerned, it has all of what I would expect out of a personal masterpiece. Theming, catharsis, and resonance. Just like I had felt with Clannad After Story. And who am I to say it's not worthy of the title of personal masterpiece? Yeah, initially I gave this movie a score of personal 9, but yeah, I feel as though it should deserve a 10 instead. So with that, we have explored how A Silent Voice attempts to create a redemption story as well as a story of forgiveness and so much more. I really enjoyed looking back at this movie, and I do hope to check out the manga soon, as people have said that it is the superior version. For now, I think it's time I bid you all adieu once again. But you guys know I'll be back. So in the meantime, try and find what it means to live. Try and find what it means to be friends. Watch A Silent Voice for your first time, or your second, or your 8th, and resonate with the cast. But most importantly, take care.